Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Hey, everybody, it's Suzanne. Welcome to The Courage Effect. In my work as a coach and a consultant and speaker, I work with leaders. And today our conversation is really going to be about leadership. Most of the clients that I work with, I really want to make sure that they are people that are intentional about wanting to do some work, both on themselves and with the teams that they are supporting. And my guest today has some very similar ideas and beliefs in this space because she is also a leadership coach. And she's also somebody that has held senior leadership positions in different organizations. And I really believe that we need to talk about leadership on a regular basis, not just by title and by role, but how we show up every day, how our mindset and our behaviors impact all of those people around us. And this is not easy work. I mean, let's be honest about it. It is hard. It is challenging to turn the mirror onto ourselves and to have these conversations about where we need to change or where we would like to change. And it takes quite a bit of courage to do that. So I am thrilled today to be talking about leadership as a topic through the lens of courage with Mikaela Kiner. Mikaela is a founder, CEO, and executive coach. Her company, Reverb, helps organizations create healthy, inclusive cultures. Prior to Reverb, she held HR leadership roles at a few Northwest companies you might have heard of, including Microsoft, Starbucks, and Amazon. She enjoys coaching leaders at all levels and working with mission-driven organizations. Mikaela is the author of Female Firebrands, Stories and Techniques to Ignite Change, Take Control, and Succeed in the Workplace. Her young adult children are good at challenging the status quo and are a constant source of learning and laughter. Mikaela, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to The Courage Effect.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, and I love that in your bio you talk about your children challenging the status quo, because that is basically, I think, my calling in life is to make sure that, I'm not just accepting this is the way that it's done. It's all about challenging the status quo. So good parenting.
Thank you. It's so funny. I was mentioning something about my bio the other day, and my daughter said, "Well, am I in it?" And I said, "Well, in fact, you are." So I was like, "It's not all about you, but yes, you are mentioned."
Fabulous. So you've seen a lot in your career as a leader, and also, as a founder of your own organization and as a coach. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about courage, how you've seen it in the workplace, because I know, I've read your book, and I know that a lot of it is about calling out and hopefully trying to minimize toxic behavior in the workplace, and it takes courage to do that. Talk to me. Let's kick off with that.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And I think it does tie in with that challenging of the status quo, especially where folks are working in teams or organizations where that toxic behavior exists, where it's okay, accepted, expected, whatever the case may be. And toxic behavior takes a lot of shapes and forms. But I'm even just thinking of things like extreme rudeness or yelling or putting people down in a public way. Unfortunately, all of which I've seen. So, I think there are a couple kinds of courage. I mean, standing up for yourself in those situations, I believe, can be really hard, and especially when you're working with someone more senior, someone in a position of power. Maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your boss's boss, and so it's not easy to call that out or let someone know you don't appreciate it or walk away from it. And I think the same is true doing that on behalf of another person, and maybe in a subtle way, say, if people are in a meeting, and whether it's someone, often a woman, getting talked over, or, someone else restating her idea and getting the credit, or something worse than that, just the people who are able to find those ways to say, like, "Oh, I think Suzanne just mentioned that," or "I'd love to hear Suzanne finish her thought, you know, so it doesn't have to be calling out in a really adversarial or antagonistic way. I think most of us would not be comfortable, and that's also often not the most productive way to show up. But doing it in a way that brings that bad behavior to attention and maybe redirects the focus. It's challenging. And again, it's especially challenging when you're working with people who have power over you, your career, your promotion, your pay, which is so often the case when we're at work.
You said something there that's really sticking with me is that the idea of when we're having those conversations, it's not necessarily about calling out the behavior, but how can we move the conversation forward in a positive way that is recognizing the contributions of people to hopefully build on that as opposed to slamming somebody down.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can't remember where I first heard that one, but I love that one. Again, women get interrupted at whatever percent more than men. It's a very high number, right? Everywhere from in a meeting all the way up through the Supreme Court. And so I love that one that's just like, oh, I didn't get to hear so and so finish their thought. Great way to redirect. You haven't made anybody look bad. You haven't criticized anybody, but you're bringing the spotlight back to that person who needs and deserves to be heard.
Yeah, and I think that that does so much in actually building investment with the person that made the that performed the bad behavior. I don't even know what else to call it, but you know that and I've performed bad behaviors too. I want to actually like also admit that we all have, right? We're all doing our best every day, and sometimes we're not really doing our real best. But I think it's really wonderful when somebody can do it in a supportive way to show you how you can bend towards the light and bring more kindness and recognize that what you're doing is potentially minimizing another person.
Absolutely. And I've done it. I mean, we all make mistakes, right? It happens. I mean, in some cases it's intentional, which is a whole different issue, but we all make mistakes. And I do remember on my podcast years ago, I was interviewing a transgender athlete, and I incorrectly talked about someone's, you know, prior identity versus their new identity.
Mm.
And they just really nicely said, oh, you know, in the trans community, we think about it this way, and we typically talk about it this way. And that was great. I mean, that was such a good correction. It was a learning for me. It did not embarrass me, you know, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who needed that learning opportunity. And so, you know, that was just a really thoughtful way that that individual educated me in the moment.
Yeah, I love that. You also said, you know, when we were talking about toxic behavior, you said it's not just about tolerating it, but sometimes it's about expecting it. And as somebody who has founded your own business, I'm sure that that's something that you had to found your own rules, your sort of business rules of engagement. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. And I think this is so common that we learn a lot of what not to do or what we don't want to do from being in situations that, you know, we personally don't enjoy or appreciate. And so, you know, like you said, we've seen a lot over the years. You know, I worked in large organizations where you see a bit of everything, right? You see some amazing individuals with a lot of heart, and you see some very toxic organizations and people and everything in between. So I had definitely had my share of experiences that I didn't appreciate and didn't want to repeat. And I think for me, founding Reverb, that was the opportunity. I mean, I sometimes call us a social experiment to say, what if we don't allow any of these behaviors? And it's not only just about our team, it's about our clients, our partners, our vendors, our friends, you know, everybody we associate with that. We have a set of 5 core values, but I like to talk about kindness. Kindness is one of them. And one of the things I say whenever we bring new consultants onto the team is that we fully expect our clients to be kind and respectful. And if they get into an organization or into a situation where they see that that is not the case, we really ask them to raise their hand and come forward and let us know so that we can understand what's going on in the situation, and if need be, part ways with that client. I think there are situations where maybe because we're also coaches and HR professionals, maybe we're hired to help someone change a behavior. And so, that's different, right? Yeah, if someone's aware and they're like, okay, I yell in meetings, I hate that I do that, I have not been able to change that behavior, come and help me. That's a different situation. But if we walk in and notice that people are either not respectful to our own consultant or to one another or to their teams, we will and have extracted ourselves. And I like to say to our consultants, there are plenty of toxic workplaces available, and you don't have to come to Reverb to experience that. And so that's just not something that we choose to tolerate.
Mm. Well, and you're making me also think about conversations I've had in my entrepreneur community about, when do you know, like before you sign on a client, that they might not be the client you want to work with. What are the cues that you're picking up on, or things that they might not be bringing that kindness and really have the same value set that you really respect and want to bring in?
Yeah, that's so smart. And we've learned that the contracting experience will be like the working experience. And so when you start to see those flags, you can definitely pay attention and dig in. But then there's other individuals that you have not met, when you arrive. And so, yeah, I think both things are true, but it's very wise to pay attention to how it feels when you're contracting with a leader or a company, because that's how someone's going to feel working with them.
Yeah. Do you have any questions that you ask potential clients to kind of glean that at all? I'm just curious.
I not specifically, but I would say part of it is about what's the work you want us to come in and do. And sometimes you'll hear something like, this is a true story from years ago. A client said, we have all of these employee relations issues coming out of a particular department. Basically, can we hire someone from your team to sit there and deal with those issues? And I said, well, you could, but if you hire us, what we're actually going to want to do is understand what's causing those issues and get it at the root cause. Well, it turned out it was the department run by the CEO where these issues were happening, and they weren't willing to confront. So we wouldn't have taken it based on the work they wanted done, but also
Yeah.
they wouldn't hire us because they did not have the courage to confront the CEO on that issue.
Mm. And that's such a common thing, right? It's like, oh, we can bring somebody in to deal with that. But it's like, no, there's a root cause and you're not really getting to it.
Yeah, too much. They just wanted the Band-Aid.
Yeah. Well, we're going to cut to a quick break. I'd love to come back and talk to you. I mean, you've taken some big leaps in your career, and that also takes quite a bit of courage. And I know recently you've really embraced being a digital nomad. So when we come back, maybe we can talk about courage through a different lens as a leader, if that sounds good to you.
Sounds great.
Fantastic. All right, we'll be right back. You're listening to The Courage Effect. Stay tuned. Courage takes on many forms. I believe that one of the most courageous things that we can do is recognize when we need help and seek out support. Is something interfering with your happiness or keeping you from achieving your goals? If you're going through a hard time, possibly struggling with depression or anxiety, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible. It's an online platform where you can be matched with a professional therapist in as little as a few days just by filling out a few questions. I know from personal experience that finding a therapist and the right fit can be really difficult. With BetterHelp, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost. For more information and to sign up to get matched with a therapist, go to BetterHelp, that's HELP.com/courage. Visiting this link both supports the show and gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Welcome back to The Courage Effect. This is Suzanne, and I'm in conversation with Mikaela Kiner. So, Mikaela, as we talk about courage in leadership, there's a lot of different ways that that can come up. We've talked about that with, recognizing behavior that we don't necessarily want to see in our organizations, or working with clients and leaders who really want to bend towards sort of the light, the leadership light, and change their behaviors. But I'd also love to hear from you about your career, and because you've taken some big, bold moves and done some leaps on your own. So, talk to us a little bit about how courage has thread into your professional experience.
Sure, thank you. I guess looking back, I'd say there are maybe three really big leaps, and those would be sort of in order. The first was taking on a 3-year assignment in India. And I'll come back to these, but just to list them. So yeah, 3 years in India with my family. My kids were 4 and 7 when we went over to Hyderabad, India. Um, the second, going out on my own, so leaving 15 years of corporate life to start a company, which definitely felt like a big risk and a big leap at the time. And then the third and most recent was doing 3 months of remote work from Costa Rica. And I think what's interesting about those, well, I don't consider myself a terribly adventurous person. I mean, maybe it sounds like I am when I say those three things in a row, but like, I'm pretty cautious. I think from a work standpoint, I've been pretty cautious, kind of conservative. I've typically taken, what feel like pretty secure jobs. I stay for a long time. I'm like financially conservative. I'm a saver, and so when I've done some of these things and people said, "Oh, that's really adventurous," or "Oh, that's really courageous," I guess part of it for me, each of those events I found like so interesting, so fascinating. I was so motivated, right? It was for me, it was just done out of a passion for whatever that experience was going to be. Like India, I had always wanted to do an international assignment. I had gotten advice years ago from a manager who said, don't do what he called the perfume bottle cities, New York, Paris, Tokyo, like whatever, the sort of, yeah, the big cities. Do something a little bit, maybe like different off the beaten path. And when I was at Amazon and I was very interested in going to India. I had been on a business trip there and really enjoyed that and enjoyed working, globally with some teams that were based there. Um, it was for, I would call it like more personal. It was for the experience, the work experience and the personal experience. I was not a person. There are people who feel like, okay, for my career, I need to do this international thing and,
Mhm.
and check a box, which is fine. It's not a criticism. For me, it was more, I'm very interested in this place. I'm interested in living and working in a different culture. I was very interested in my kids spending at least some time growing up outside of the United States.
Mhm.
So that was really motivational to me. Um, Starting Reverb, that's its own whole story, right? About just the fatigue with the corporate world and the bureaucracy and HR. And so it did feel scary. I would say of the three that I mentioned, that felt really scary because I was also the wage earner for a family of four and the provider of the benefits and all of those things. So that felt
Mhm.
like a huge risk. Um, at the same, I was so compelled. My energy was clearly not in staying in the kind of jobs I'd been doing. And even when I looked at the next job posting for a VP of HR role, I felt zero energy. And I could experience that. Like, I have
Yeah.
no enthusiasm to go do that. So I really need to go do this other thing. And then I'll spend more time on Costa Rica just because it was recent and it was so much fun. So I spent 3 months working remote from a very small town in the Northwest called Avellanes. There are about 10 restaurants there. It's a 25-minute drive to the nearest gas station. It's pretty remote. It does have great internet, which, from a work standpoint was all that mattered. And I was walking distance to the beach. So from a personal standpoint, that was all that mattered. But the idea originally came about because my daughter, who just finished her first year of college, had started talking a couple of years ago about taking a gap year. And she'd been studying Spanish, and we'd been to Costa Rica together. And I was not totally trying to encroach on her gap year, but I said, hey, if you do this, we could go to Costa Rica for a little bit, or we could go somewhere and study Spanish together. And then one day out of nowhere, we were in the car and she just announced, she said, well, I'm not doing the gap year thing anymore. And I was like, well, what happened? Why not? And she said, I think if I stop going to school, if I take a break, I'll never go back, which I
Mm.
thought was actually very wise for her. But what I found was I was really disappointed. I was like, well, I was looking forward to this whole, my portion of the gap year. And so that made me realize that I could do it anyway. And it would be my first year with two kids in college, so no kids in the house. And so I planned it. I mean, for about 2 years, I knew that's what I was going to do. And it was amazing. I mean, even beyond expectation, which I had very high expectations. I think it's funny because as I was planning it, I was trying to be honest with myself about what my fears were,
Mm.
because I knew I wanted to do it. I knew I was going to do it. I was very excited, but I was also, I was trying not to ignore what might be making me nervous. And really the biggest and only thing was, so very small town. When it gets dark, it's pitch dark. I'm down a little dirt road with like one street light, and everything in my town pretty much closes by 9. And so, and I knew some people because we'd spent time in the area, but it's not like I had a big friend group, out in the middle
Mm.
of nowhere. And so my only fear was, am I going to be bored or lonely, especially at night when things shut down? I, not 1 minute. I mean, I didn't have a second, to be either bored or lonely. But yeah, that was my only real fear. And then of course, and English, there's plenty of English where I am. It's, big tourism. But I have been studying Spanish and I wanted to work on my Spanish. And so, of course, there's the embarrassment of being an early Spanish speaker. And my daughter, who's taken 7 years, really encouraged me. One of the last things she said before I left, she said, Mom, I know it's embarrassing, but you just have to talk to people. And I just like took that with me and I talked to anyone and everyone. And people are so kind. And if you can get beyond the basics of the sort of hello, goodbye, and ordering
Mm.
food, they actually become complimentary. And so it was the first time where anyone complimented me on my Spanish because I could speak some sentences, like I could explain what I was doing there and that I was working remote. And then people got really impressed and thought I knew how to speak Spanish and would, just talk at me. But yeah, it was really remarkable. And from a work standpoint, so one is I get this question of, well, who ran the company when you were there? And I
Mm.
say the same people who run the company when I'm here. I mean, we all we all run the company, and that was really no different. I also got the question, well, wasn't it hard to work when you're in this beautiful tropical place? But honestly, it averaged low to mid 90s every single day I was there.
Yeah.
So midday was pretty hot. And frankly, unless I was going to be in a swimming pool or an ocean, I was just as happy to be working in air conditioning during the peak heat. And, I got out in the morning and the evenings. Um, so yeah, it was an experiment. It's now a plan. So it's, to be repeated annually. And I highly recommend it. And we have always encouraged the team, especially since COVID, but even before, I think we were sort of hybrid before we had the word hybrid.
Mm.
Like, hey, if you're going to go spend a couple weeks with your nephews in Maine, so you're going to work from there, or you're going to help out, your sister with their new baby, or you're going to do an extended trip and some is vacation and some of it is you're working from Bali. I mean, whatever it was, I'm just really about if you can do your job, go for it. I never care sort of where people are. It doesn't matter to me. And I've never found that it matters to the way that people get their work done. So yeah, we can pretend I was just role modeling, for my team, but I think it was frankly amazing and really um, rejuvenating. I mean, that's the other thing I would say to companies who are like, oh, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with people doing that. I was just so energized by being there and by getting away from the Seattle winter a little
Mhm.
bit. So I highly recommend it.
I really enjoyed tracking you or following you on Instagram and on LinkedIn as you were going through it. And I hadn't even, I mean, it's so obvious the temperature. Like when you got back and you did the little synopsis on LinkedIn about what it was like to, to go through it and some of the questions that people were asking. And I hadn't even thought about that. Like, okay, beating the heat and the number of hours that you're spending in the humidity as well.
It's hot, it's humid. I mean, I was born and raised in Seattle. So I don't know why, but I say I was built for the tropics. I am very happy between about 70 to 90 degrees. Like I'm very comfortable, much more so than at 45.
Mm.
So yes, I recognize it might be a bit hot for some people. And yes, the humidity. I mean, my hair just curls up like crazy there. That's one sign. And yes, yeah, I find you might end up showering 3 times a day because every time you leave the house and come back, you have to shower. But for me, it was so enjoyable. I mean, I knew, yeah, that climate is perfect for me and gives me so much energy.
Mm. There is a certain amount of loneliness, regardless of where you are and how long you're there for. And I think that that's the thing too. Like even when you go with your family, or if you're on your own, there's still a certain amount of being alone and just needing to like find your people, find your vibe. I wonder if being there for 3 months made it easier because it wasn't a more permanent thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it is very small. I've always been a city person. I mean, I understand Seattle is not a large city, but it is a city. I went to school in New York. I did my assignment in Hyderabad, which at the time was 7 million. So and I like the city and I like the urban life. And when I was younger, meaning until pretty recently, I like to go out and the variety and eating, things and culture and restaurants. I would say I've definitely slowed down in the last few years. It probably did start with COVID and just continued. And so I didn't mind, the slower pace. I didn't mind that I was interacting with fewer people. But I think the advantage of the small town is you get to know people very quickly. So within no time, I mean, I knew not only the people who owned the restaurants I went to, but many of the wait staff I knew by name. We have a wonderful surf instructor there who I now consider a friend. And so you kind of form these friendships very quickly. I've never lived in a small town, so this was really new to me. And of course, there's expats and there's a small expat community as well. But yeah, I still want to go spend a year. So that's probably after my daughter graduates and both kids are working, so nobody will be home for the summer. I would love to spend a year, and I think that, that might be a really different experience, but I want to experience it because I think there is some part of my rest of life plan that probably involves more time in Costa Rica.
It definitely sounds like that is the case. So, and it's the same thing. I mean, the the courage to also like engage with people that you don't know, right? And to be like, okay, I'm the foreigner. And I think especially like being, I don't know, sometimes from America, I'm always like, oh, I'm sort of like the colonizer coming into these places. Like I don't want to force myself on other people in a way that assumes that I know everything about their culture or where they are. So there's a certain like that to me can hold me back from engaging, even though I'm a very social person. I'm just sort of like, okay, well, I tend to get shy and I don't usually get shy. But I think that the language is a big part of it. Like the idea of just getting beyond, like, okay, you're going to butcher it, but that person is okay because at least you're trying.
Yeah, and I think people are extremely kind there. I mean,
Yeah.
if I have to generalize, people are kind and patient and helpful. I actually had to go into the pharmacy for something. And I, did the greeting in Spanish, and he asked me in Spanish or English, and I kind of sighed and said English because I was like, I don't think I can navigate a medical thing.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm happy to practice with you if you want to try using your Spanish. And I thought that was just so generous, and I
Mhm.
experienced a lot of that. I will tell a very short story on the kindness too, though. I went on a road trip. I drove a couple hours south to another town for a little weekend getaway. And there was a hill where they had been laying gravel, and it was still quite thick gravel. So as I was driving up this hill, my car came to a full stop. Like I got stuck in the gravel in the middle of nowhere on this road trip. And I was kind of like looking around. I got out of the car and looked around. I mean, I had no way to get out of the situation. There's no Geico, right? There's no roadside assistance. And
No AAA.
I knew if I just waited that something good would happen. And sure enough, this man's driving by in a pickup truck. He stops. The first thing he does, he gets out of his truck and he starts looking for the larger rocks and picking them up one by one and tossing them out of the road. And then he guided me how to reverse straighten until I could get my car up the hill. And then he just waved me on. So yeah, I think that I definitely relied on the kindness of people around, and they did not let me down. It's just, which is one of the things that, many things that I love about being there. I just think people are helpful and go out of their way on average more, I think than what we might experience here.
That's so beautiful. I mean, the whole idea of just like trusting something to happen, and especially when we're in a foreign country, when we're alone, that is not an easy thing to do because we're giving up control. But you saying like, okay, it's going to work out, and having faith in it, sometimes it just works.
Yeah. And I literally had no choice. I was sitting there and I thought, I've never been in a situation like this. Like I'm completely helpless. Really, right. I mean, really, what was I going to do? There was nothing I could do. And it did not take long for someone to come by and help.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the Zen approach worked for you.
It did. It definitely did.
So as we're getting ready to wrap up, I mean, a few things that I'm really hearing from you is kindness, bringing kindness to our exchanges, and above all, bringing it to other people and expecting it back, and getting to the point of understanding, like we might all not be there at the time that we want to be there, but how do we bring more understanding and compassion to just our exchanges overall, whether it's in a foreign country or whether it's at work. But we don't have to just act a way that we think or is expected or that, is prescribed in some way. So it's about how do we bring kindness to each other? How do we potentially do things differently? And I really honor and respect that you do that both in your life and in your work.
Thank you. I think that's really well put. I always have this moment when I see the bumper sticker of student driver, please be patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to create one that says human driver, please be patient, because it's like we all need and require patience, and there are situations where I think people recognize that. And then there are situations where we forget. And yeah, I love the way you describe it. It's like, let's just not forget that we all need that many times, throughout the day and throughout the week.
Yeah, definitely. And I also find that when I know that I need it, I know that other people need it too. Like it's that whole idea of, okay, I'm probably not the only one feeling like this right now.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Mikaela, thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it, and it was wonderful to have you as a guest. Any final thoughts as we wrap?
Thank you for having me. And yeah, just thank you for doing this podcast and picking a topic that I think is really interesting and where we all have a lot of learning to do. As I was saying before we started, I have looked through your list of speakers, and there are so many amazing and impressive women I know on that list. And so I'm going to be sure to listen to every single episode.
Thank you. Well, I'm honored to have you as one of them. So thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Stay courageous. The Courage Effect is brought to you by Weller Collaboration. We're a team of talented coaches, executive advisors, and consultants who partner with our clients to enhance their leadership, become more adaptable, and to really get out of their own way to work more effectively together. More information about Weller Collaboration is available via the links in our show notes. Please spread the word about the Courage Effect. Rate and review your favorite episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. Share with your colleagues, family, or anyone in your universe who might be inspired by a good dose of courage. If you have feedback, thoughts, or would like to apply to be a guest, please contact us via our website. Benny Mathers is our producer. Dave Nelson composed our theme music. Alex Sandyforth is our administrative maven. And I'm your host, Suzanne Weller.